The Nullification Crisis of 1832 was one of the most dramatic political showdowns in early American history. Centered on the state of South Carolina's defiance against federal authority, it tested the strength of the young nation and foreshadowed the sectional tensions that would eventually lead to the Civil War. The crisis revolved around tariffs, states' rights, and the limits of federal power, issues that remain relevant to American politics today. The crisis had its origins in economic disputes. In the early 19th century, the U.S. government imposed tariffs to protect domestic manufacturing, particularly in the North, from foreign competition. However, these tariffs disproportionately harmed the agrarian South, which relied heavily on importing manufactured goods. Southerners, particularly in South Carolina, viewed these tariffs as unfair and oppressive. The Tariff of 1828, known in the South as the Tariff of Abominations, was particularly controversial. It raised duties on imported goods to an unprecedented level, making foreign products more expensive and forcing the South to buy from the more industrialized North at higher prices. Southern leaders saw this as an unjust exercise of federal power that benefited Northern industries at their expense. At the heart of the crisis was John C. Calhoun, a South Carolinian and sitting vice president under Andrew Jackson. Calhoun was a staunch advocate of states' rights and developed the theory of nullification, arguing that states had the right to reject federal laws they deemed unconstitutional. He based this theory on the idea that the United States was a compact between sovereign states, meaning that no state was bound to obey a federal law that exceeded constitutional limits. In 1828, Calhoun anonymously authored the South Carolina Exposition and Protest, laying out the nullification doctrine. According to this doctrine, if a state found a federal law unconstitutional, it could declare it null and void within its borders. South Carolina, with its economy heavily reliant on exports and imports, found this argument especially appealing. By 1832, tensions had reached a breaking point. Congress passed a new tariff that slightly reduced rates, but did not satisfy Southern opposition. In response, South Carolina convened a special convention and declared both the tariffs of 1828 and 1832 null and void within the state. The South Carolina legislature also passed measures to prevent federal enforcement of the tariffs and prepared for military resistance if necessary. This act of defiance brought the state into direct conflict with the federal government. President Andrew Jackson, a fierce defender of the Union, saw South Carolina's actions as a direct challenge to national authority and a dangerous precedent that could lead to disunion. Jackson responded swiftly and forcefully. He issued a proclamation in December 1832 condemning nullification as unconstitutional and treasonous. He made it clear that federal laws must be obeyed and warned South Carolina that any attempt to resist would be met with military force. Congress backed Jackson's stance with the Force Bill of 1833, which authorized the president to use the military to enforce tariff collection if necessary. Despite his reputation as a states' rights advocate, Jackson's loyalty to the Union took precedence. He viewed nullification as a threat that could unravel the nation and refused to let a single state undermine federal authority. As tensions escalated, Henry Clay, known as the Great Compromiser, stepped in to broker a peaceful resolution. Clay proposed a new tariff that would gradually reduce rates over the next decade, addressing some of the South's grievances while preserving federal authority. Faced with the reality of Jackson's military threats and the prospect of economic relief, South Carolina accepted the compromise. In March 1833, the state repealed its nullification ordinance. However, in a final act of defiance, it nullified the Force Bill, symbolically asserting its belief in states' rights, even as it backed down from the immediate conflict. While the immediate crisis was resolved peacefully, the underlying issues remained unresolved. The debate over states' rights and federal authority continued to divide the country, and South Carolina's defiance foreshadowed the secessionist movement that would erupt into the Civil War 3 decades later. The crisis also cemented Andrew Jackson's legacy as a strong executive leader willing to take bold action to preserve the Union. At the same time, it solidified John C. Calhoun's role as a leading proponent of Southern resistance to federal authority, setting the stage for future conflicts over slavery and secession. The Nullification Crisis of 1832 was a pivotal moment in American history. It tested the limits of federal power, the resilience of the Union, and the depth of sectional tensions. While temporarily diffused by compromise, the crisis exposed fundamental disagreements about the nature of American government, disagreements that would ultimately lead to the Civil War. Today, the crisis serves as a reminder of the ongoing balance between state sovereignty and national unity in the American political system.